I will definitely do that.
And mute mics.
We're starting.
Good evening, everyone. Before we get started, it is 6:08, and I really want to thank everybody. We've had a little bit of technical challenges. We're glad you're here tonight. We're probably going to give it another minute here because we know some other folks are trying to move over and catch on this link. So what I'll do now is do a little bit of an opening, but know that we're still having people join us. So good evening. Thank you for being here and taking time out of your evening to join us. I'm Lisa Stengel, the Executive Director of Planning and Evaluation. We're here tonight to discuss the Pre-CIP report. We know there's a lot of interest in some of the sections of this report. The report used to be called the Arlington Facilities and Student Accommodation Plan, or the AFSAP. Nobody really knew what that was. The work used to be done over the summer, and then in the fall, the AFSAP was published with only a few weeks to get input from the community before the school board would vote on CIP direction. Often a lot of things were coming together last minute at that point. Now, what our team has done, working across the school year with staff from across the school system, is publish this information early in order to give time for input from the community, both on the recommendations and what will go into the next CIP for the CIP direction. Staff have done this work during the school year in order to publish earlier and make sure you have time to provide input. The report presents recommendations based on studies conducted and an overall view of the multiple needs and trade-offs. The analyses are all found in the pre-CIP report and the supporting appendices. These are only starting points for discussion with the community. We have the next few months to engage with one another and as many communities as possible. We are counting on your engagement. Staff is listening to you, to your support, your concerns. They're reading and responding to every message you send. All of this will be compiled and presented to the school board ahead of the votes, both this fall and then again next July or next June. This is the first in a series of community table sessions, not just for APS to hear from you, but also for the community members to hear from one another. Thank you to the community members and staff for coming together for this. We're also joined by representatives from JFAC and FAC volunteers. Thank you for being here too. We'll start by going through a very quick overview of the report, followed by remarks from FAC and JFAC. After that, we'll go into the breakout rooms. We'll see the topics on the next slide. Before that, some important things to note. This event is being recorded and will be available online afterwards, especially for those who are not able to participate. When you're in your breakout room, please use the Q&A function to ask questions. We strongly encourage input or questions that focus on the recommendations, the methodology, and the data. If anyone is not yet on the Spanish audio line and would like a live interpretation, please turn off the audio for this call and then dial into the number on the screen. When the time comes to move into your virtual breakout rooms, please choose from these three topics. The first breakout room is middle school boundary recommendations and the dual language immersion program move. The second breakout group is swing space project and site identification. And the last one is the long range renovation plans for existing school facilities. We're allotting time for 2 rotations, so you won't be able to see all 3. Again, we are going to publish all of these later on so you can actually see what took place in the one that you did not get to. For each rotation, there will be a short intro to the specific topics, followed by 25 minutes for input and questions. Now let's go to the recommendations made in the pre-CIP report and at the June 29th school board work session. The previous CIP directed staff to look at swing space in support of the long-range renovation plans. Staff evaluated 61 sites in the county, and through an extensive analysis, the team narrowed the list down to 8 potential sites. Of these 8, repurposing a neighborhood elementary school has the lowest capital investment. Staff then evaluated a neighborhood school sites and recommended that Nottingham be the potential site for swing space. The pre-CIP report also follows up on plans for future phases of the Arlington Career Center campus. This aligns again with previous CIPs and the existing ACC building which will be repurposed for the use by Montessori Public Schools of Arlington. And it caps enrollment on the site at 2,570 seats, which is equivalent to the combined capacity of the two largest buildings on the site, including that new ACC facility and the larger repurposed ACC building that will be repurposed by MPSA. The Pre-CIP report also recommended balancing middle school enrollment across the county through a full boundary process in the fall of 2023. Together with the boundaries and based on the work done in the immersion visioning process, it's recommended that we move the dual language immersion program from Gunston to Kenmore. I again want to thank everyone for being here and hope we can all make the most of this community table session. And now I'm going to give some brief background on the recommendations and sort of the big picture informing this work. So for those of you who have not been involved with prior CIP processes or the AFSAP, which I know most people are not aware of, this is really the work that FAC and JFAC looks at every in their reviews and feedback to the school board. APS follows a 2-year CIP planning cycle between the pre-CIP report and the CIP. The milestones are highlighted by month, which include in the fall, we do projections. Then we have what we call the enrollment management plan in the winter, which actually looks at next year's enrollment levels and makes sure that we are making enrollment manageable at each school. And then we take that information and we do an update to the projections in the spring so that we make sure that the resources that come along with the projections follow the students to the schools they're going to attend. Then, like in this coming school year, so on the school years that end in an even number, it's a CIP year. So next school year, we're going to have a similar cycle with those things, except instead of this June report being on the pre-CIP, the superintendent in May will propose his CIP, and the school board will vote on that in June. So on June 23, 2022, the school board voted on the FY 2023-32 capital improvement plan. The second column includes a check mark for all of the projects that were funded in the 2022 CIP process. The third column identifies projects that will continue into this upcoming CIP. Projects in the pre-CIP report are a result of the school board's vote and motion back last June, which directed the superintendent to do the following to prepare for the next CIP. They included prioritize the renovations of existing APS school facilities using a framework that was included and that you'll hear about in the long-term renovation breakout group. It included identify and develop swing space so that if needed to support the renovations, we would have that. So we had to come with both of those recommendations together. And the recommendations for the renovations will be presented to the school board in September ahead of their vote in October on the CIP direction. And then if feasible, the school board wants us to begin construction of the first renovation project by fall of 2026. Later tonight, we're going to have 2 breakout groups that will give you a chance to learn more about swing space and the renovation. Staff from F&O, from Facilities and Operation, will walk you through that long-range renovation plan. This process has been in the works for multiple years. During the 2021-22 school year, FAC and JFAC weighed in on the evaluation criteria that was cited by the school board in their motion. Consultants are using that criteria to evaluate all school facilities. The results of that study, again, will be shared in September ahead of that October vote on the CIP direction. We expect the school board to direct the superintendent to gather more detailed costs for several of the schools at the top of that list, so that the CIP recommendations next May include specific costs and timing for the first one or multiple renovations. Some of those renovations will likely require us to use swing space. What we've learned over time is it's not ideal to renovate or do an addition around existing student populations. We've done it at Abingdon, we've done it at Ashland, McKinley, and at each one of those, it becomes challenging both for operating a school, but then also for the construction and the timeline. We also know that when we sought bids on the first Career Center project, that a lot of the timeline for it and the costs were related to the staging of rebuilding a building around an existing student population over 3 years. The new ACC project actually builds next door into a new building, and the timeline for it is much shorter than anything that was in prior proposals. Staff from P&E will also lead a breakout group on the swing space session. Again, the team reviewed a list of 61 potential sites for swing space earlier this spring when they identified repurposing an elementary school as the best option that we saw among the 8. We then conducted a subsequent study to look at which elementary school made sense for swing space. Providing the recommendation now at this point in time allows the community to review our work and weigh in. If we had waited to provide this recommendation in October, there wouldn't be a chance right now for the community to weigh in on what we were presenting to the board. I encourage you to review the pre-CIP report. It's 36 pages plus supporting appendices. There's a lot of pages when you add those appendices. But to get an overall picture of the next capital improvement plan, APS has a set amount of resources to take care of all of our school facility needs, both for improvements, for new spaces, and for how we make sure we're using our resources. The report begins with an overview of enrollment, capacity, and projections, and then lays out a number of competing priorities. Like our budgets at home, we need to decide the best way to prioritize spending. With the school board making renovation a priority, we need to consider the trade-offs and how best we can save money. Now I'm going to shift and focus a little bit on some of the background on enrollment and projections. So in the last decade, if you've been around in Arlington, you know that enrollment was growing. We grew by 42% over the last decade. We were catching up. Many schools were over capacity, had relocatables, and lots of parts of the county, kids were bubbling at the seams. Today, what we're seeing is enrollment is leveling off, while growth across the school system is uneven. So we're seeing pockets where student enrollment continues to rise and other places where we see declines. In the short term, or over the next 5 years, we're projecting a modest increase in enrollment. In the long term, we're projecting a modest decline. We're still at all-time high levels, and I'm going to show you a bit on that in a moment. The next CIP is setting APS up to manage future increases and decreases in enrollment. So however enrollment fluctuates, we need to be able to actually respond to those changes and make sure all students are benefiting from the same capacity needs. This CIP needs to prepare APS facilities for increases and declines in student population, avoiding past mistakes where many facilities were given away when enrollment was declining. APS enrollment, I think it's important for you to get a sense of where APS enrollment has been over time. The baby boom is at the start of this chart. And APS has experienced some major declines and then increases. So enrollment has been on a steady upward trend since 2007. In 2019, the fall before the pandemic, enrollment peaked at an all-time high, exceeding the all-time high that was previously in the 1960s, again, during that baby boom. In 2020, with the pandemic, we saw a dip in enrollment. More students have returned, and today we're really seeing some leveling off. It's a chance for us to reset and make sure that we're preparing not just for the next 5 years, but for the next 20 years. This next chart, we didn't show this at the work session, but again, it's another one that I think is helpful. So this chart shows enrollment by grade cohorts. The blue bars were actually cohorts of students by grade on the September 2022 snapshot of enrollment. September 30th, we capture that each year. The gray bars at the right show the number of students who actually graduated, so graduating cohorts. And the green bars at the left show the estimated kindergartners in our projections. The number of projected kindergarten cohorts, the students in the kindergarten cohort, is expected to be fairly stable and flat for the next 3 years of projections. And over the long term, incoming kindergarten cohorts are expected to be below 2022 levels. Not only in Arlington, but across the nation and across the region, what we're seeing is the birth rate is declining. And yes, I see kids in my neighborhood. I live in Arlington and we're all seeing a lot of kids, but we're not seeing the same levels that we had in the past. Prior to the pandemic, the incoming cohorts that we used to see in these charts we're about 2,300 students per the groups moving through, and we're seeing slightly lower levels across most grades here, across all grades. So now I'm going to show you by school level what we're monitoring. Before we join the breakout groups, it's important that you understand what we're anticipating for enrollment at each school level, so you understand some of the trade-offs that we're trying to help the school board prepare for. So first, we use this graph for each school level, and I'm going to spend some time explaining the graph to orient you to the information. The light blue bar on the left is September 2022 enrollment. Above the light blue bar, you'll see a dark blue marker and 1367. The marker is elementary capacity. And APS currently has building design seat capacity for a little over 14,800 students. That number, 1367, is the difference between capacity and enrollment. So when you see that gap of white, it means that we have more seats than we have students. Next, the green bars are projected enrollment over the next 5 years. Again, there's excess capacity compared with enrollment when you compare the blue marker and the projected elementary enrollment. Finally, the lighter green bars are long-term projections. At this point with the elementary data, we're very cautious on how we use it because this is looking at future students who have not yet been born now. So 5 years out, those kids at the elementary level are not yet born. And that's where we do depend on the county's data, looking at the what their birth rate, what they're expecting, forecasting for birth rates, and then our what we've used for our kindergarten capture rate each year. So looking at the elementary level, there's excess building design capacity across the 10 years of projected enrollment. By 2026, the year the last CIP directed us to provide swing space for those renovations, we're expected to have excess elementary capacity for about 850 students. The surplus continues, and in 2028, the capacity changes to reflect adding 400 additional seats when MPSA is relocated into the Career Center. Looking at the next slide on the zones, we covered this at the work session, so I won't go into it a lot, but where we have the excess capacity is in Zone 1, the Plan Langston Boulevard area. The other areas of the county, we don't have the same excess of elementary capacity that we have. I'm going to go to the next slide. So a very similar slide for middle school. What we're seeing at middle school that's different is really the, we've got enough capacity for students, and you can see we've got extra capacity across the district, but there is a variation in the range of capacity utilization. Gunston's capacity utilization is expected to be 111% when you look 5 years out, and Williamsburg will be at 71%. So part of this boundary process and the recommendation for that was really to make sure all schools came to more of an average level. And then at the June 29th work session, the superintendent also recommended moving the middle school immersion program that's currently located at Gunston to Kenmore. Part of this came out of the discussion during the immersion visioning process. That process, which was completed in spring of 2022, wanted to make sure that we kept a middle school immersion at one place unless it got big enough, and it's not big enough at this point. And this would have to be coupled with a middle school boundary process. Immersion's pretty big, and moving it into another middle school means we need to balance enrollment. Their big recommendation was to make sure that it was in a central location. So while we did look at Williamsburg, we didn't recommend putting it there because Williamsburg is at the corner of the county, just like Gunston is. Now looking at the high school level, I'm actually not going to spend any time here because I don't think we have as much on this, and I know that we want to go into our breakout groups. If there are questions later, we can answer those through Engage. But let's go to the timeline for our boundary processes. So the pre-CIP is recommending boundary adjustments at all school levels. The middle school process would begin this October, be voted on in December, and those new boundary changes would take effect for the 25-26 school year. So it's 2 years out. High school would follow a similar process and will begin a year later in fall of 2024 and follow a similar time frame. This allows us to plan for the new space at the ACC. We do expect that some of the academic recommendations from academic programming recommendations that is coming from Dr. Mann's team will have implications for high school enrollment and offerings. And so we want to make sure we've got that before we begin to make those changes, and that we don't have to do multiple high school boundary changes. And then the elementary process is planned for fall of 2025 with those changes taking in place for 2026. We can't move on a process for elementary school until we have a decision on swing space. We don't know yet if the school board will want to go with Nottingham or look at one of the alternatives and spend that money to make sure that happens. As decisions are made, in this next, as we move towards a CIP, we'll reassess if we can change this timing to make it work better for folks too. So stay tuned.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Daryl Johnson, the Director of Strategic Outreach, and I want to take a moment to go over the opportunities for engagement in the coming months. So we have currently ongoing public participation. The community is encouraged to review the Engage with APS webpage, where we are updating information. We have FAQs. We are updating those frequently as we're receiving additional questions. And then we also encourage everyone to contact us through Engage by emailing engage@apsba.us. We have a quick turnaround time. We are responding to all messages. We really want to be responsive as possible. And then we also have additional upcoming table sessions, as well as staff will be at the Arlington County Fair, August 18th to 20th. So we will have a specific section for APS, and there's going to be different tables there. And one of the tables will be engaged with APS. And we want to make sure that we are responding to community questions, because community engagement is very important and key, also very vital and critical as we are updating the recommendations before it goes, before it is submitted to the school board for them to take a vote. So currently, this is community table session number 1. Again, we have the Arlington County Fair, August 18th to 20th. That'll be in person. August 22nd is going to be the community table session number 2. That is an in-person session that will be occurring at Kenmore Middle School. It'll be the same time, starting at 6 p.m. September 1st, we have the planning unit data review for boundaries. That information is currently posted on the Engage with APS webpage, so the community can review the planning unit data information. If there's any changes in regards to their planning units, such as information about upcoming developments, anything of that nature, they can review it. And if that is not shown currently in regards to the data, they can email us and provide us with the information so we can get that updated. On September 5th, we will have the community table session number 3. That will be virtual and focusing specifically on the middle school immersion program move. And then on September 11th, that'll be community table session number 4. And that one will focus on Nottingham, the proposal to repurpose that school as swing space, and that again, that will be virtual. And then September 15th, that is when the first session or the first time frame for feedback concludes. And so we want to make sure before the school board votes on the CIP direction this fall that we can actually review everyone's feedback and we can compile that so we can actually submit that to the school board before they make a decision in regards to the CIP direction in October. Next slide. And then we also are launching a new way to get feedback from the community. So this is the interactive community engagement platform through Thought Exchange. And so this new platform allows the community to participate in one of 2 thought exchanges to share feedback on the recommendations in the pre-CIP report, specifically on the proposal to repurpose Nottingham as swing space, and then also to relocate the Spanish immersion program from Gunston Middle School to Kenmore Middle School. Participants are asked to share their ideas in response to an open-ended question. All ideas are shared confidentially and anonymously. Once you have shared your ideas, you're able to rate the thoughts of others, review them, and then also the exchange will be open until September 15th. So this is a new way that we'll be able to actually collect feedback and determine where the community consensus is in regards to specific thoughts. And so we really want people to participate. If you have the ability now, you can pull out your phone, you can just open up your camera and you can scan the QR code. But then also we'll be posting the presentation tomorrow and you can click the link, but you can also go to the Engage page and under the Thought Exchange, it's actually under the main page. We now have a new page for Thought Exchange and the current ones that are available. So you can access them that way as well. But please, again, take the chance and provide feedback. This is the first time we're sharing this information. The exchanges just went live today, so there aren't many thoughts yet. So we do encourage you to come back. And again, you are able to actually review the exchanges, provide additional feedback up until the September 15th deadline. Next slide. And then these are some of the key dates to keep in mind. So a decision has not been made in regards to any of these recommendations as of yet. So the school board meeting will be focused on the recommendations for the FY 2025 to 34 CIP direction, as well as the relocation of the middle school immersion program to Kenmore and the refinement of boundaries effective for the 2025-26 school year. That'll happen on October 12th. On October 26th, the school board will take action on the FY 25 to 34 CIP direction. On December 14th, the school board will act on relocating the middle school immersion program to Kenmore and refining boundaries. Again, those will be effective for the 2025-26 school year. On June 11th and 20th, there will be a school board public hearing and action on the 2025-34 CIP. And then on November 5th, we have public participation to vote on the school bond referendum. So as we want to just emphasize to the community, we are still very early on in this process. We are listening to you. Please continue to provide your feedback so that we can refine the recommendations as best as possible, so that when we go through the different stages and we're at these key dates, we can share this information. And so all of the information that you do or the feedback you do provide, we do share that with APS leadership, the cabinet, as well as with the school board. So they have informed information. So when they're making the decision, they can take that into account in regards to the decision that they are making.
Are we just introducing ourselves?
Yes, well, I can go ahead and introduce you. So I would now like to introduce Kelly Litzner. He is on the Facilities Advisory Committee and he is the chair.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make you do that, Daryl. I just wanted to know. I am Kelly Litzner from the Facilities Advisory Committee. I'm the new chair for this year for the CIP process. Just a couple of things. One, all FAC meetings are open to the public. We have a public comment section in each one of them, and we've got a pretty robust schedule this year. We meet once a month, typically towards the beginning of the month. Second thing I'll say is we have a summer session going right now so that FAC members prior to the school year are able to add their own comments on the pre-CIP reporting guidance, which we also assisted APS with when it was the ASVAB last year, and we'll be providing our final comments and recommendations to the school board here in mid-September and giving a presentation at that board meeting in middle of September. And the last thing I'll say is the fact that there was a FAC subcommittee that actually contributed to that long-range planning guidance as formulated by APS and advised on it, such that ideally we took comments from the community and improved it over the last couple of years so that we can think through how to actually do renovations going forward. And that's all I'll say. Thank you very much.
And next we have Stacy Snyder. She is the chair of the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee, or JFAC.
Good evening. I'm Stacy Snyder. The Joint Facilities Advisory Committee works as a joint committee for both. We report to both APS and the county board. And I'm mostly just here to listen to this session. And the JFAC, we had one meeting in last month in July to discuss the pre-CIP report, and our next meeting will be in late September, and then we will try to get comments from the JFAC, formal comments to both, and we will send them to both boards. But since it is an APS report, it will, primarily be reporting to the school board. Also, our meetings are open to the public, and you can find the links to them on the county website. And I look forward to learning more about all of these recommendations and processes. Thank you.
Daryl, is your microphone working?
Yes.
Okay.
And so at this time, I was putting an announcement in the chat so everyone knows. If you go to the Engage page, you can actually find the links for the breakout sessions that we do have. So there will be 3 breakout sessions. So one will be on the draft middle school boundary recommendation report. Another will be on the swing space project report / swing space school site report. And then the last one will be on the long range renovation plan for existing school sites and facilities optimization study. So at this time, if you would please visit the Engage page if you haven't already, or if you have it up to access the links for those sessions. And in those sessions, we will provide more specific detailed information about those individual items, as well as you'll be able to ask questions and submit them. The staff will answer as well in live in real time. Thank you.